Are we starting?
Yeah, it's we'll start soon.
Gonna introduce. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe we should start, Shani, I think.
We are accepting, I think.
I think we have 26 people, 27, so I think we should start. Maybe. Okay, we'll start, everyone. So Bula and good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well, as most of are working from home. I know it's a difficult time for our country here in Fiji. A lot of people are home and you see a lot of things happening around. Just encouraging everyone to stay strong and stay positive during this time. And once again, good morning. And I'd like to thank on behalf of Investment Fiji for joining us at this very important webinar on labeling and food safety for US market. My name is Kamal and I'm the acting CEO at Investment Fiji. With me, I have also my colleague, Shanil, who looks after, he's a market manager for US, and for any inquiries, any information you want, you can always connect with us. We run a number of programs around around market access and opportunities. Also, we have recently launched Exporter Guide for Exporters that can assist you if you are a new exporter or somebody that is not aware of the rules and regulations of exporting. I'd like to also thank Caroline for joining us. She is a senior regulatory specialist from Registrar Corp, and today will be giving us very useful insight into standards of labeling and food safety for the US market. We did have an earlier webinar on a similar topic on FDA requirements for US, and she has been very generous enough to assist us with the process. So thank you for joining us. And our program this morning is quite straightforward. We will have a presentation. You can understand the presentation, and then you can ask us question and answer. So that's kind of program. Just a housekeeping rule around how we'll run the webinar. Should you have any specific question you would wish to raise, please type in the chat box. This will allow us, our panelists, to provide that useful input through the chat box, and we'll be able to answer it, and Shani will facilitate that. So once again, thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully you get a lot more information from this webinar, as US remains an important market for us. So please do not hesitate to also get in touch with us if you require any information around exporting from Fiji, or require any information on rules and regulation about exporting from Fiji. So I'll hand over to our speaker, and she will be the one guiding us through the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal. Hi, I'm Carolyn Johnston from Registrar Corp, and I'm based in Adelaide, Australia, but I look after Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands from here. So I've been with Registrar Corp for nearly 13 years. Registrar Corp is a US-based private company that assists with FDA compliance. We do also assist with some services for Canada and Europe, but our main focus is on FDA compliance for the US. So we have a range of services that we offer, which I've went through in some of that detail in my previous webinar, but today I'm going to focus on FDA food labeling. I have also another presentation on food safety and preparing for inspections, which I believe I'm doing at a later stage for you. So today it's just focusing on the FDA food labeling compliance. Registrar Corp head office is in Virginia, Hampton, Virginia. We have over 200 staff with 20 offices globally. Within our office in Hampton, Virginia, we have a specialist team that does specifically on labeling compliance. So not just food, but also for cosmetics, medical devices, drugs, over-the-counter drugs, such as hand sanitizers, etc. So we've got a dedicated team of over 20 staff that just do labeling compliance. So today I'm just talking on food labeling. But if anyone has any questions about labeling for cosmetics, over-the-counter drugs, medical devices, we can also assist with that. And if you wanted to save those questions for the end or another time. So yeah, I'll just start today with the food labeling. The FDA did make some significant changes to the labeling requirements, which they did over a staggered time frame. But now it is, since the 1st of January this year, it is now a requirement for everyone. So I'll go through those details, but it's all focused on what is now presently the requirements. So firstly, what must appear on the food labeling? So number one, the mandatory declarations that are required: the statement of identity, net quantity statement, ingredient list, allergen statement, manufacturer, distributor, packer identity, country of origin, additional languages, and nutritional facts panel. So I'll go through each of those points in detail with you. So firstly, the principal display panel. So that is where you know, your customer will see the main panel, which is seen when they display on the retail shelf. So, and then there's the information panel, which is immediately to the right, unless, as it said, panel is unusable, flaps, etc. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of variations in packaging styles these days, but that's the principal display panel and information panel, and that's the more the normal there that I'm showing you. So firstly, the statement of identity, it must be name specific by law. So, you know, the specific statement, like whether it's beans or biscuits or what is the common user name of that product, and something that's understood by the general public. So this is something that actually, you know, does require some changes, because marketing might want to use some fancier names, but it does need to be, you know, something that, you know, your customer will clearly understand. And it can be subject to standard of identity, so that's related to a different product type, must be placed on the principal display panel, and must be a size reasonably related to the largest text on the label. So that does change, as I'll go through that, about when it's smaller labels. So just with labeling too, the FDA consider labeling to be, you know, the outside packaging, and also they do, you can't make claims and statements on your website, for example, that are not on your product. So they consider website part of your labeling as well. So I'll just go through the standard of identity: establishment specific requirements for food to be called by a certain name. They may describe the ingredients that may be added or manufactured process that must be followed. So that's, you know, such as, you know, if it's mixed nuts or, you know, vanilla ice cream, that sort of thing. It may describe, you know, specifications like the percentage of milk, say with ice cream, what percentage it is that must be met. So here's a couple of examples of labels of different products where it clearly states, like strawberry jam or vanilla ice cream, mixed nuts, for example. The net quantity of contents. So be aware that the US is not metric like the rest of the world. So that is usually the main reason we see non-compliance, or the first thing that sort of stands out of being non-compliant is that, you know, we're in, say, grams or mils or whatever, then the US is in ounces. So So the net quantity of the contents is the amount of product in the container, and must be in terms of weight for solids, numerical count, or liquid. So that's where they have the ounces for there, or the you know, how many with the liquid. And so it must include both the non-metric and the metric measures. So there is a specific format for that. And so the minimum type, so based on the size of the principal display panel, and it must include the net weight or net weight for solids. Specific placement is a requirement. So I'll go through that as well, of where that needs to be on the label. So the ingredients must declare every ingredient by its common or usual name, so no E numbers. So clearly state what that ingredient is. Must be in descending order by weight. So that's something new they added. Multiple component ingredients must declare sub-ingredients in parentheses. Most cannot be grouped together. So that's another area that is commonly seen as well, that they group together, but it must, you cannot group, it's got to, cannot be grouped together. Additional requirements for colours and flavours. So there are certainly some colours and flavours that are banned in the US that we may be using in our other countries. And they're also subject to food additive regulations. You can actually, there's some colours if you want to register those colours as well, but I'll talk about that later. And the Allergen Statement, Food Allergen Labelling and Consumer Protection Act. So that's where you must comply with that. Declaration of any ingredient that is a major food allergen under the Act, or that contains a protein derived from any major food allergen. So that's, you know, particularly with nuts, may be indicated in the ingredients list or by use of contains adjacent to the ingredient list. So once again, important with nuts, milk, eggs, etc. So here, here's a list of them. So the more common ones, of course, milk, eggs, fish, crustacean, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, soybeans. Any ingredient that contains a protein derived from a major food allergen. There's now new voluntary disclosure of sesame permitted and encouraged by the FDA. That's very recently been added. And then, of course, the manufacturer, packer, distributor must declare the corporate name and address of the manufacturer, packer, or distributor. The distributors and packers must include a qualified phrase such as manufactured for or distributed by. So full address must be given, but street address may be omitted if found in a local directory. Country of origin. The statement required by US Customs and Border Protection for articles of foreign origin must be in English. Country must, where the last substantial transformation took place. So I know that was one of the questions that was asked about with the country of origin. So, so say, for example, the last processing of the product was in Fiji. So that must be where the country of origin is. And it must be placed near any reference to a country that is not the country of origin, e.g. US distributor address. Additional languages. So, for example, if you wanted to include French, the whole label must be in both languages. So firstly, all mandatory information must be declared in English. No additional names are required, but if a label requires presentation in another language, all mandatory statements must be presented in that language. So the complete mandatory statements must be in both those languages. Brand names, models, and product names that have no English are typically exempt, of course. bioengineered food disclosure. The US Government of Agriculture, the USDA, has established a list of food and food ingredients that are subject to disclosure requirements. Certain products containing these foods must disclose the presence of bioengineering on the label. There's a part of the logo there, using one of the options permitted by the USDA. If a company has actual knowledge that food is a bioengineered food or contains a bioengineered food ingredient, it must disclose it on the label. Organic claims, this is another one that's often asked about. So this is regulated by the USDA, but applies to foods under the FDA jurisdiction. Requires certification by USDA recognized agents unless MOU exists. 100% organic ingredients, excluding water and salt, use the USDA organic seal, which is that logo there. 95, then different percentages there. It's a details may only disclose, and then 70% or less disclose individual organic in the ingredient statement. So as I said, this all came into effect from January 2021. They first published it back in 2016, changing, and then it's been a sliding scale depending on your annual food sales. But as from 1 January, as I said, it's now required for all food sales into the US. So this is an example of the previous that appeared on there for the last 13 years. So if you have this label now, this format for your labeling, it is now non-compliant. And I know that these labels, these products are being not at the moment, not necessarily detained, but being returned. I've had quite a few just recently where the product has just been returned back to Australia and New Zealand. So the FDA haven't actually opened it, but if they continue to send it, then they will, they have that right to have an import alert and destroy the products. So this is the new label, and so as you can see, it is quite different. The serving sizes, for example, are on there. Calories is of #1 in the largest font, obviously important to the Americans. And then the way the total fats, cholesterol, sodium, total carbohydrates. So all of that has changed. So I'll just go through that as well. It is critical that all companies that market food products to implement these changes to avoid detention and refusal of these goods, as compliance dates have passed, as I just said. If you've got old labels, you really do have a big risk of detainment. So as it said, as that example showed, vitamin D and potassium are now mandatory declarations for the label. Vitamins A and C are now voluntary. Calories from fat may no longer be declared. Fluoride may now be voluntary declared. That's, of course, not for food. And sugars now to be declared as total sugars. Changes to content. So added sugars must be declared when present at certain amounts. Quantitative amounts for the 4 mandatory vitamin minerals must be given. Modifications to how folate and folic acid are declared. New methods for determining vitamin A and E values. And new units for the vitamin D, niacin, vitamin A and vitamin E. So there are, as you can see, quite significant changes. There's more restrictive definition for dietary fiber, changes to the daily references values and recommended daily intake values upon which the daily value is calculated. I think there was another question about that as well. And changes to the FDA established serving sizes for some foods such as beverages, ice cream, appetizers and candy. So it does vary on the product type. So there's not just one standard for that. and that has changed quite significantly, particularly I've noticed with snacks, snacks like potato crisps and biscuits, things like that. We call them biscuits, snack foods, yeah. So yeah, this is, as I showed you before, the standard label format changes. So as I said in my those slides just showing, changes made to the order of nutrients, changes made to the font note. So all of this has a specific font sizes of not only just the declarations, but the size of the font used in each of those that's used on the nutrition facts, and even the border on the outside of the box. Quantitative amounts of certain vitamins and minerals required. So as I said, that's all been changed as well. And then that statement at the bottom. So there's also a simplified label format is permitted when products meet certain FDA requirements. So that can be things like, and it relates to nutritional content. So tea, coffee, spices, that has a simplified panel that's required, which is permitted. So it's all related to the nutritional content of the product with that. Then there's also, depending on the size of your product packaging, the tabular label is permitted. So there's an example of how that's to be shown now. Once again, following those same formats of how that nutritional facts panel is to be shown, the font sizes and the order that it's to be shown. And then also a linear panel. When there's a tabular packaging will not fit on the product packaging. So that might be, small tubes of, say, herbs or different products, for example. And then there's dual column labels. So that might be per serving sizes. So say it's a large packet of potato crisps. So that would have on the dual columns showing the serving size and then the contents of it. So FDA has mandated dual column for certain products. So for products in packaging size that is 200 to 300% of the FDA's reference amount consumed. So yeah, as I said, often large packaging, or something that is small serving sizes. So particularly things with high calorie content. So here's a couple of examples of that. So that's where I'm showing the per serving and then the per container. So that might be a packet of crisp or biscuits or snack foods, for example. And this one's referring to, say, some muffins as well. So there's the per half a muffin, and then the whole muffin. It must be large muffins. So it shows, how many serving sizes per container. So these are some of the common labeling issues that we see. So the name of the food doesn't conform to FDA requirements. So that may be something that we locally might call a food. Like, for example, I know that, we may refer to a biscuit as something maybe more savory than what the US does. In different like custards and creams and things like that we can use different food statements there. Net quantity statements that do not include ounces, pound declarations, as I mentioned before, they're not on metric, only country. Because unfortunately, it makes it very difficult to have a label that is compliant in other countries outside of the US because of, you know, the fact that they're not metric. For example, here in Australia, you know, we have to show grams first, not ounces. So whereas in the US, you've got to show the ounces in a particular format. It does show the grams, but it's got to have ounces first, as I showed on those previous examples of labeling. So this is a major difference that, you know, makes it very difficult. Or, yeah, I must say, I've not seen any labels that can be fully compliant with the FDA and also in other countries. So in most cases, so it usually requires you completely different label for the US market. But so incomplete bilingual or multilingual labeling. So that might be where you've one part of the label has in French and English and the other part's only in English. So that's incorrect. Incorrectly formatted nutritional facts panel or none at all. So that's as per those formats I showed you. And the nutritional facts panel that uses per 100 grams for the nutrient values rather than the FDA's serving sizes for that food. And as I mentioned before, ingredients using E or INS numbers. So Registrar Corp have a labeling review service that we, as I said, we have a team of people in the US that specifically just do labeling compliance. So what we recommend for all our clients is that first you send us a copy of your label. And what we do is just come back with some very brief comments on why that labeling is non-compliant. You know, if there's nothing major, we'll say, you know, maybe it's just your, you know, the metric side of it needs to be changed. But if there is other issues, we sort of dot point what those issues are, and you know, and also comment whether we would think you risk sending that product to the US the way it is. So if your labeling is completely non-compliant, then we have a labeling review service. So our regulatory specialist does a full report on and updates your labeling. So it's print ready. It's really combining our graphic team and our labeling specialist and our legal team. So this is a very comprehensive service. It takes about 15 to 20 working days. Those reports can be 20, 30, even more pages long. So we go through every part of that label and then reference it to all the regulations and why we recommend all the changes to the label. You then have 30 days to go back and forward to make any changes that are required to meet your marketing objective and ensuring that your labeling is FDA compliant. So we also have a full range of services. We do the registration, US agent services, prior notices for all your labeling, ingredient, and product review. Just briefly on product review. So if there's a product that, you know, we think is maybe it could be a dietary supplement, maybe it could be a over-the-counter drug, we recommend then a product review. So with the product review, we go through and evaluate and research all the statements, claims, ingredients of that product. And from there, we would come back and say to you, well, yes, it could be considered a dietary supplement. You would just need to make these changes to any statements or claims. Or else, yes, it is a over-the-counter drug. For example, you know, it's got, you know, some active ingredients or some, you know, with a dietary supplement, say it's, you know, some claims being made there that really has moved it from being a food product into being a over-the-counter drug product. So that's a very comprehensive service which has extensive research done by our specialists, and then the report is then submitted from there to you. If we think that it's not going to be able to be marketed in the US at all, we will clearly state that. Then another service that we have is for shelf-stable products, is for our low acid and acidified foods. So that's any of your canned, your Tetra Pak, particularly with juices and those sort of product, canned beans. So this is an additional requirement that's required beside the registration of your facility, and it also requires you to list that product. So the manufacturer of the product needs to go through the what we call the FCE process. So we have a wizard that we can send you and just see if you qualify, your products qualify for needing that additional requirement. And then each of those products needs to be listed, which we call the SID verifier. So the SID listing of each of those products with the FDA. We also food safety and FSMA compliance services. So I'm going to cover that in the next webinar about the FDA inspections, how to prepare for an inspection, and how we offer the mock inspection service, our FDA compliance monitor, FSVP, which is for your importer. We also have our food safety training. So I'll go through that all about doing a food safety plan in the next webinar. Detention assistance, so when we're your US agent, how we assist with all of that. And then the DWP petition submission. So yeah, that's, I don't know if anyone, that's a service we offer, but hopefully you don't need that and don't get detained. So I think the next, is any questions that might be, that's my information as well. So yeah, Chanel or Kamal?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Carolyn, for the comprehensive presentation on the labeling and the food safety for the US market. I'm sure this has been very useful to our participants who are considering exporting to the US. We do have some interesting, rather burning questions from our participants. So let's get straight to this. The first question I have is, can the food jar labels that we use for the US market be used for the New Zealand and Australian markets? Can that be done?
Sorry, say that first sentence again.
Can the food jar labels be used for the US market, can be used for the New Zealand and Australian markets?
Yeah, usually no. I mean, as I mentioned before, because they're non-metric, just that is it's a standout that it's non-compliant for Australia and in for the US, because they have to both be in that set format. And also just the way that nutritional information panel is shown is very specific for the US, and in most cases, no, it wouldn't be meet the Australian regulations as well.
All right.
So in most cases, yes, you need to have separate labels for the US. Some companies do stickers over the labels, and which you can do that, but the FDA don't like it on an ongoing basis because it can be removed.
Okay. Yeah, so for those participants who are interested for the New Zealand and Australia market, we have market managers with us. For the New Zealand market, we have Carlene, and for the Australian market, we have Losana. Please do send your request and we'll connect you to these country managers for the food and labeling requirements if you wish to export to Australia and New Zealand. Caroline, I have the question too, which is focusing on if you are aware of any company from Fiji that has been approved through your agencies that have experience in making and printing these food jar labels.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know of any with the printing.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't. Well, here in Australia, but not. Yeah.
Not in Fiji. Yeah, we'll.
No.
Okay, we'll connect this with our current listing companies we have. So probably we will be able to assist with this.
Yeah. I mean, I know that here in Adelaide, we have one of the largest labeling printing companies in the Southern Hemisphere, and they do a lot for the US, but that's here in Australia.
Yeah, I think Kamal has to add some as well. Yes, Kamal.
So maybe whoever has that question, Chanel, we can find out. I'm sure there's few companies in Fiji that can do it.
Okay,
so
definitely.
we can connect.
Yeah, thank you, Kamal. You have covered this in your presentation in terms of the serving size, but is there any guidelines around it? Like I think for New Zealand, it is 20 grams per serving. So any estimates on what's the average serving for US market? Maybe for products which is bottled like jars or jam or peanut butter, for instance, for those products?
It does vary by product type. So yeah, it really is on an specifically to the product types. So, you know, snack foods compared to ice cream or, you know, dairy and things like that. So yeah, it's quite specific.
I think what I'll do is I'll connect the company directly to you, and based on which product it is, and then the further assistance can be provided.
Yeah. So when we do, as I mentioned, you know, if you want to send us a copy of your labels, and then we come back with brief comments on that. So that's a time when we would say that your serving size is incorrect or something. Yeah.
Okay. This is also an interesting one. I think you covered in your slide, which is do businesses have to list country of origin for each ingredient in their labelings?
No, they're just the major ingredients. So yeah, so like where the last processing of that product was.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, say for example, you know, that's the flour from Fiji and things like that. Yeah, is a major ingredient of the biscuit, for example. Yeah.
Okay, that's noted. So I believe recently there has been an introduction of HARPC under the preventive controls rules. So if you will be able to explain what HARPC is and why is it important for exporters to comply with this?
Yeah, so that's all part of food safety. So which I can go into in more detail in the next webinar. But so what the FDA require under the HACCP is a food safety plan. So here in Australia and in New Zealand and Canada, they actually accept under our HACCP that our food safety plan meets those requirements. So for those countries, we don't actually have to submit it, but they just accept that what we're doing is accept that. I know in other countries outside of that, you may not have, companies may not have food safety plans. So we can certainly help with that. We have, we can either do the food safety plans for you, or we have online training to assist with doing that they can develop their own food safety plans. So it's it needs to be done by someone with what's called a PCQI qualification. But yeah, so I can go through that in a lot more detail in my next webinar for you. So
yeah. So I mean, there are similar food and safety schemes, which is, of course, you have highlighted on the HACCP, there is ISO, there is BRC, etc. So, however, none of these schemes or plans rather completely, they certify the requirement of the FDA preventive control measures. And there was a specific question relating to differentiate between the HACCP and the HARPC. So that can be clearly, I believe this will be covered in our next webinar, but just for the to start the ball rolling for the understanding what is the key difference between these two schemes.
Certainly, and if they want to, in the meantime, want me to send any links on that information, I can certainly send that. So you know, we have, I can give an overview of what all the training is, and so it all comes under what they call the GFSI, the Global Food Safety Initiative. So yeah, we've got all the training and information all on that, and the different levels of qualification and what's used in different countries around the world as well.
Okay, so two interesting questions I have also from the participants that just messaged. One is, which I think you already highlighted on the labeling part. So because the number of exporters have heavily invested already into their packaging to use the stick on the labels over the current labels, so how have they used the old packaging? How can they do this? How they're able to use the stick on labels over their current labels until they use their old packaging?
They can, as long as the FDA, as long as they don't do it on an ongoing basis. So, maybe the next, 1 or 2 shipments, but the FDA really don't like it. There's an example of one of my clients at the moment that has sent ice creams, to the US, and they've got the wrong nutritional information panel on there, so that they're presently trying to put stickers over what they've got. But because it's a frozen product, the label won't stick.
Sure, yeah.
So this is a common problem, is trying to also, even if the goods get there with an incorrect label, some do try to, adhere new labels over there in the US. That's not easy. First, to get the goods out of, they're being held by the FDA or customs, and then to put new stickers on it. And sometimes the new stickers don't always work as well. So, not always easy.
Yeah. So on the expiry date of a certain product, how are the manufacturers able to identify this? How the question is asked in a very ambiguous manner, but I'll try to best dial it down for you. They have asked, we would like to ask how the manufacturer knows that the label of the expiration date of a certain product is provided.
Sorry, I'm not really. So the best before
also,
date?
Yeah, I believe they are just interested to know how do they determine, the manufacturer themselves, that the product is going to be expiring. So I guess that will come from the shelf life and other things.
Sure. Yeah.
Just to add to the question, I think he's asking, like, how do you determine the life of the product? So how is it through a testing, or is it through certain processes?
Yeah, it could be that.
And that is part of the testing. So with the shelf stable products, that's what I mentioned before with the shelf stable products. So that is covered in. So we give a questionnaire that goes through all of that, and then all of that's covered during the listing process of that product. So we have wizards on anything to do with food safety and with the food canning establishment, to see if you do need to comply with that. So if anyone wants that, I can send the wizards to them, and then they just complete the information, and then we come back and say whether this also applies to like food safety plans as well. So whether that is meeting the requirements. So if you complete these wizards with this information, and then it comes back and tells you whether you do comply or don't comply. Okay. So what a Registrar Corp, we want to. The whole aim is that your goods are compliant, that you don't get your goods detained. So we try to give you as much information on all of that as possible, so that you understand the risks and what the compliancy requirements are. We try to, with our wizards and that, for all our clients too, we give them a portal. So that has on there, when you do your registration and become a US agent, where you're US agent. So your certificates of registration are all on that portal. So at any time they can show the certificate of registration, and also for your food canning or the listing of each of those products as well. So we keep all that on the portal for them as well. So that's where they can submit prior notices and all of that as well. But I can, and our compliancy monitoring as well, but I can cover that more another time.
Okay, thank you. So the last but not the least question for this webinar we have is if our product is high in something, in particular, for example, mono unsalted fat rather than poly unsalted fat, can this be added to the nutritional panel?
There's very specific requirements for trans fats and all of that. So when we do the label review, we do go into quite a bit of detail on that, on what the FDA requirements are. But yeah, there are some very strict guidelines on that.
Okay, so well, thank you very much, the participants and Caroline, for joining us today and providing us a very comprehensive and well detailed information that is needed for the US market. We look forward to the food safety and the inspection webinar in coming days. We will definitely send out the request and we hope that everyone is part of it. The copy of the presentation for today and also the recording will be shared with all the participants. Should there be any more questions, please do let us know. We are more than happy to address them and connect you to the Registrar Corp as well. Thank you. Any closing remarks from you, Caroline, for the participants?
Yeah, but by all means, please send us copies of your labels if you want us to check if they're compliant or not. It's a free service just to give some very brief dot points on compliance. So we're very happy to do that for you. And then if you want to use our label review service from there, we do give a discount on it if we're your US agent, but we do it for clients that we haven't done the registration and your US agent for. But it really is a very comprehensive service, and it's all about reducing any risk of detainment. You know, we know that it can be, you know, very expensive. You know, the FDA, if they do detain goods, are really a nightmare to deal with because they're such a large government department. Just even trying to contact them at the borders is not easy. So we have specialists that do all that if you do have detainments, but you know, the best thing is to prevent that, and that's what our service is all about, is having fully compliant labels.
Okay, thank you. Kamal, any comment before we end our session?
Thank you, Chanel, and thank you, Caroline, for joining us and giving your time and very insightful information for us. And I'm sure a lot of our exporters and potential exporters will get a lot of information out of this. And there is a question on, will we do it for other countries? I'm sure we'll be looking at for other countries, and we'll be happy to assist our exporters as much as we could. And if you want, you can follow us on our Facebook page. We continue to run a number of programs to assist our exporters and potential exporters. And you can always get in touch with our market managers or me, and would be happy to assist. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye from Australia.